So, welcome everyone. My name is Manvel Robinson. Welcome to our program, The Art of Collages. In honor of our 20-year anniversary, we thought that it'd be best to basically bring some form of attention towards a different form of art. And that form is pretty much the collage process. So, Diasporal Rhythms, allow me to give you all a background on Diasporal Rhythms and the purpose of the organization and its existence. As I mentioned, we hit our 20-year anniversary. Diasporal Rhythms was started by Carol Briggs, Patrick McCoy, Daniel Parker, and Joan Chrysler. These individuals were collectors before they knew they were collectors. And they were sitting around and they realized, like, hey, we realized that a lot of individuals that are artists of the African diaspora are not getting the proper recognition that they felt they should receive, especially compared to some of their peers within the art industry. So they went on a campaign, creating an organization, and their goal was to basically promote the art. And so as they went about promoting the art, the organization grew more and more, and they basically brought individuals on, because a lot of us are art collectors, and we don't even know that we're art collectors. A lot of people feel like that when they collect art, or art collector is someone of a certain social status. And their goal was to pretty much knock down that wall, basically to demystify that myth. And so a lot of our members collect art, and they didn't know they were art collectors. So another part of the process that the organization wants to do is, although we said that we were focusing on artists of the diaspora, we have basically evolved as well, and we just want to focus on collecting art. So we're not here to say we represent some institution. We don't represent just any particular artist. Of course, everyone has their favorite. But regardless, we want to really promote the arts. And so today, in our program, we have basically brought some great artists together to basically have a conversation about their work and just about the space of collages. So I welcome you all to this program. I hope you gain a lot out of it like I am, and I hope it pretty much gives you insight as you move forward and continue collecting collages or whatever the case may be. And from that, I want to introduce my host. He's a member of Diasporal Rhythms. He is a member of the education program. The education program is the leg or arm, whichever one you want to use, of Diasporal Rhythms that pretty much is used to educate individuals on what's going on in the art industry. Rather, like I mentioned before, whether it's the creation of a particular form of art, how to care for your art, and the best way to pretty much, I guess you could say, acquire your art. Because there's a process to it, and a lot of us are not sure how that process works. So as I mentioned, the education program, that's our focus. And today, I am bringing Charles Chuck Fowler, and he's pretty much going to introduce everyone and take us through our program.
All right. Thanks everybody once again for coming out and battling the traffic to be with us today for our Art Smart. This is the last one of 2023 as we look forward to 2024. This is our last hurrah, but then also celebrating the Diasporal Rhythms 20th anniversary. So thank you all for coming out to this event as well as the other events that we may be going on, and also our past events. I'm going to introduce you to our panelists for today. I'm going to give you their names, and then I'm going to also let them speak on themselves, their passion, artist motto. We're going to go from there. Let them introduce themselves, and then we'll start with asking the questions to our panelists. If you all also have a question, motion, let us know that you have a question. Let Mandel know, and we'll make sure that we get you the mic and answer your question, okay? All right, so our first panelist, Mr. Brody, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from.
How y'all doing? My name is Brody. I'm originally from the DMV area, born and raised in DC, but I moved to Prince George's County, going to high school, so I pretty much spent the majority of my days in Peachey County. I went to college in Peachey County, high school and everything like that. What would you ask as far as like how?
Have an artist statement.
Oh, well, that might be real long. Artist statement. I guess you can say I create from a space of, I guess, Black culture from the past to present, and hopefully for like a beautiful future for us, acknowledging like our culture through the art form of collage. And that's it.
Cool. Next we have came all the way from Houston, Texas.
Hey, I'm Kayla Marie. Born and raised in Houston. I come from a writing background, actually. Education, always had art a part of my life. Currently working on my MFA in painting. But I haven't painted in over a year and a half. But that's okay. And I work in a space that is an observation of identity. I kind of started out with this idea of depicting marginalized communities, but the more I, started working, I figured out that it was my identity that became the focus of my work.
Okay. Thank you. Next, homegirl. Krista Franklin.
My name is Krista Franklin. I am an interdisciplinary artist. I think that the majority of my work revolves around collage. Collage is like a methodology for me to like think through a lot of different things. But I started off writing. Always made art at the same time, and my writing practice was the public practice. My art practice was my private practice, and it wasn't until I moved to Chicago. I'm originally from Dayton, Ohio. Land of the funk, Gym City. When I moved here, it was the poets who really forced me to put my visual art into the public arena. And it's been an interesting journey, to say the least. But I will say that, the collage.
Yeah. First, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for coming as well. My name is Ren Dillard. I am here from Atlanta, Georgia. I am a multidisciplinary artist, a curator, sort of an art advocate in general, in Georgia specifically. But the way I perceive my work is that I'm a futurist. I like to try to imagine what the future will look like for melanated people in my work, and also trying to give brothers that look like me some sense of higher philosophical ideas, if I'm lucky.
And just listening to you guys, it seems as though the more we learn about collage, and one of the reasons why we really wanted to bring collage to the forefront in this Art Smart was because we really like to focus on things that we normally don't talk about in conversation with art, and try to gain more knowledge about it, and then also put that knowledge out. So with that being said, collage work has also seemed to be put on a different scale than acrylic or paint or watercolors. What's your take on the level that they've given collage work as not being seen as fine art? Anybody want to take that on?
Just
Go
jumping in.
ahead, Brody.
We just jumping
Go on, Brody.
Coming from my personal experience, I feel like, or I believe, and I feel that, the collage work is one of the oldest forms of art that we've been doing since we've been here. I mean, you can date collage back to the 1930s. But it's not just a formal, I guess you can say, cutting of pieces. To me, collage is everything. It's life and how you build everything you like to build a bigger picture, or even when it comes to fashion. I mean, I know some ladies and here, or some men also as well. You might go to the mall, see some shoes you like, and you're like, you know what, I don't really got nothing to go with this. But I'm gonna go home, and then there's another piece that you find, a shirt or a hat, and it matches. Like, to me, that's collaging. That's grabbing things that doesn't necessarily make sense. They come from different spectrum or different aspects of the world, and you bring them together to make one cohesive picture. And I feel like with the aesthetic or style of it, like how it's not getting the praise of like acrylic, personally, me, I don't agree with that. Because I feel like even with painting with oils or acrylic, it's still a process of a collage. It's still a build-up even when you're painting. So with any material, you're actually putting everything together to make one, like say, cohesive picture.
Yeah, I don't subscribe to that belief that there's a hierarchy when it comes to methods of making. You know, that's, and again, I agree with Brody. Like collage, to me, collage is what I call the democratic art. You know, I think if there's any prejudice against it at all, you know, it revolves around that fact, right? Like we've been making collages since we were babies. You know, you can get, I tell people all the time, if you have a piece of paper, some magazines, scissor and some glue, you good to go. You know what I mean? And I think that, you know, what makes a collagist an incredible collagist, or gives them a kind of position that they have for themselves, is how they manipulate those things, right? That's the voice, that's what I call the voice that's coming through, right? So it's not, to me, I don't think about it in a hierarchical way that, you know, painters and collage artists, I use a lot of paint in my work. You know, I use a lot of different kinds of materials in my work, you know, and I think that most artists who I'm trying to watch my mouth because it's a baby in the room, you know, who work with collage, would probably say that they pull in other things as well. So yeah, I don't believe that.
Just to chime in, so on my business card I actually have alchemist, and I don't know if anybody knows about alchemy, but it's essentially turning something that was not necessarily worthless, but not necessarily all that valuable, into something that is valuable. And so I think collage is a form of alchemy, where, you know, you're cutting up, you know, sometimes magazine pieces or clippings, and you're assembling it into something that actually turns it from basically lead into gold. And wow, is that a bird?
A bird.
Oh, okay. I just saw a bird on the floor over there.
Attracting that nature.
As long as it ain't no mouse, I'm good. Yeah, not a little mouse, that would be no fun.
Right, he's like, yep, exactly. You called it in the room.
Good stuff.
Do you want to chime in on it, Kim?
I guess briefly, without getting super radical, I have the tendency of kind of going on a soapbox, but I do feel like there is this idea that material, I guess, kind of governs the value, right? And I do think that that material is attached to a certain demographic, and it takes enough, or it takes these conversations, it takes people talking about this medium to put it in the forefront, right? And to acknowledge it within the institution. I think that it does kind of skirt this line of craft. And there's this argument of craft not necessarily being fine art. And then without getting into that, it goes into feminism, and it goes into women being attached to craft and things like that. So I do think that it's a valid question, that it does exist. There is a hierarchy, whether we subscribe to it or not, but it's like trying to break that barrier, because it's, like you said, it's adjacent, right? It's adjacent to life. Like, collage is everything that we do, and we're just kind of, I guess, materializing thoughts in a different way, because we all inform each other, right? Collage is the one thing that is informative of everybody and everything that we're doing, right? So I guess that's kind of like my 2 cents.
Could I ask a question on that question that you presented about hierarchy and is it fine art? And it makes me go back to a situation back in the 1950s, early 50s, when the Spiral Group came into existence. And that, the person that I'm are familiar, was Bearden in the Spiral Group. It was a group of artists in New York. And he came up with this idea, he presented it to the rest of them, other top famous artists at the time, of cutting off papers and so forth, and they poo-pooed it. So I can see where in the very beginning, because he's one that has gone on to become one of the most iconic collages.
Absolutely.
And yet, his contemporaries in this group that was about trying to promote African American art, they didn't like the idea of doing collage. They put it down as this. I was wondering if anybody else knew the rest of that story.
Right, because I think we're kind of, you can be so against something, but still be complicit and subscribe to it, like indirectly, right? It's like, I don't know, it's like white flight. You know, it's like if everybody is saying that this doesn't provide value, you're like, well, I want to be heard, I want to be seen. So indirectly, I can't really do that because they're not going to see that as valuable. So let me, I don't know, it's like chess, right? Play the game until you have the position or the place to voice and kind of change it and navigate in a different way.
I agree. I just don't hate.
And speaking to you guys and knowing you all, a lot of you do write, Brody and I were having a conversation, and we were talking about how certain artists draw from different things, whether it can be they get their inspiration from pain or past trauma or just things that they may see. Where do you pull most of your inspiration from with your pieces? I'll start with you, Krista.
You start with me? I mean, right now, let me clarify this. Early in my career, I pulled inspiration from iconic imagery. So what I was trying to do at that time was I was really thinking a lot about artist propaganda, you know? So I was really thinking about how can I create images that are iconic, you know, and pulling black imagery that is iconic into the space. So that was originally what I was doing with the work. And as I kept moving forward in the work of where I am now is, you know, I pull from really my imagination, my imaginative space, you know? And it's very much, at this point, a kind of improvisation. You know, it's almost like jazz. It's me like thinking about like what's around me in the space and what can I pull into one space. So I don't necessarily think that now, currently, I have like an inspiration, although my work is naturally associated with like Afrofuturism and Afro-surrealism, you know, and those things definitely kind of create a framework for me to play in. But I think that my inspirations now just come from whatever is around me at the time. You know, it's not necessarily like a goal or an objective beyond making something that's beautiful to me, you know? So that's my answer to that.
Yeah, I love the idea of philosophy. I feel like I'm a philosopher first, and the art is just a arm of that or an expression of that. So, in like reading the Nag Hammadi text or the Secret Doctrine of Madame H.P. Blavatsky or the Tibetan Book of the Dead or the Tao Te Ching, all of these ideas I'm always thinking about. And sometimes I'll like talk to brothers that look like me, you know, I'm just hanging out and they like have no idea what I'm talking about. Yeah, right. And so I've always just tried to make my work sort of a bridge between those two worlds. So that's how I would answer that.
But it also brings that conversation piece where you can draw them in and say, this is what this is about, which I think all work should be a conversation piece. You should be able to talk about the background behind that piece, or how it feels, like how I feel about a piece, or what it brings to me might be totally different than what the artist may have intended for it to bring, but it's still an idea behind it.
Yeah, believe it or not, most of the feedback I hear from my collectors is that whenever somebody comes in their house, my piece is always a conversation starter. And they're always asking questions about it. And so I take pride in that.
Yeah.
Kind of like Chris said, when I first started getting back into designing, it came from a place of like not knowing or like the unknown. And it's crazy, right before we started, Kay was talking about one of her inspirations or some of her work reminds of like Deborah Roberts. And she's the reason why I dove back into it. I was in National Portrait Gallery and I saw a piece of hers by, it was entitled, the piece on Stanley Jr. the third, and learning about his story and him being the youngest African American who was sentenced to electric chair wrongfully. And I literally stood in front of that piece probably for like 30 or 40 minutes, just taking it in. So when I started back creating, I wanted to actually tell the stories of our community. It was so much information that I knew, and I was like, you know what? I want to basically create imagery that gave me or give everybody else that same feeling that I had when I was standing in front of her piece. And not even taking in the history, but taking in the story, looking into his eyes, actually like feeling or imagining what the pain was, being this young black boy in this country, being wrongfully accused and actually being sentenced to your death, and you literally can't do anything about it. And I know I didn't know the full extent of that story, and I know a lot of other people probably didn't know it as well. So that made me dive back into the lab and go back into all the books and all the information I read to try to pull out those stories. And I feel like that's when I really first started creating, but now I actually feel like I'm just creating from a space of healing. I've learned that, like I said, creating can be a part of my identity. It can be a part of my growth, my healing, my pain, and like my self-expression or self-expression to the fullest. For me now, I create from a lot of spaces where I'm unlocking myself. Being a black gay artist, even saying that right now, years ago, I wouldn't even say that in a word or a sentence to tell people that, oh yeah, I'm a black gay man. There are a lot of black gay men who live the same life that I live, or if you're not even within that community, you still feel some type of oppression. So for me, my creative process right now has allowed me to open up, even coming up here, because naturally I'm probably like an introvert, but my art has allowed me to come out my shell and pretty much bloom. And I feel like that's why a lot of my work has different elements of flowers of growth in it, and I want to give that to anybody else. Whereas you can create, and that can be turned from, like I said, turning pain into beauty, or expressing yourself. And for me, it like gave me my voice, as Krista said. So I feel like I didn't have one before I started creating. So creating this in this style allowed me to amplify my voice.
I guess for me, I would say that my collages are very much like photography adjacent, because a lot of the images I reference myself, and I'm just a hoarder of everything, like the creases here. I'm like, look at the lights, the way that's curving, I can use that. And so it's almost like deconstructing life. And I would say that my collages are very maximal, and I kind of want to overwhelm you, because that's kind of what I'm feeling when I'm creating them. And I use this deconstruction and interruption to make you think. They're not always a direct narrative. I don't think that that's my job, and I want to share the responsibility with the viewer. Yes. Like, that's y'all's job. Yes. Like, we got to work together to come up with this narrative. But I do think that there are some like challenges in there. My city is definitely a huge influence for me. Transportation is definitely a huge influence. A lot of people, when they see it, they see transit and they're, wondering like, what's your affiliation with the subway? And I'm like, well, there's not one. But, but, I like the grittiness, and I like how transportation is a neutralizer, right? It makes everyone the same. You have poor people, you have, you have people who have businesses, you have all kinds of genders, ideologies, all in this one place, and we all have somewhere to go, we all have someone where we're coming from, right? And it's just the grand neutralizer to me. And so I think that life is definitely my inspiration. It's all of our inspirations, right? But just kind of the mundane, the things that are often overlooked, and finding out a way to just reconstruct and interrupt your way of thinking, because it's like, wait a second, these things don't go together. But in the entirety, it is a full picture, right? And so, for me, like I said, I am the observer, right? And I just kind of want to document and present, and that's kind of, I guess, my inspiration. And I think now it's kind of shifting into more older photos. I'm half white, half Nigerian, and so tying in that African culture is kind of important, but juxtaposing that with the white is just a really interesting thing that's happening. And so I think that has become a lot of my inspiration as of lately.
Okay, good stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. Pat?
I've got a lot of questions, but the first question is, the first question is in regards to 3 of the collages that are on the panel. I see elements of design as preeminent in the execution of it. Krista, I think yours has less of a design concept, but the other 3, I see design as a point. Am I hitting it right?
Yeah. For me, most definitely, yes.
Yeah.
So, my undergrad was in fine arts, but a lot of my work is all done like digital, so that's what sets mine apart. I have basically my work is digital collage, but I come from a design space, so I actually want to create my own design studio one day. But I love that I can create design and have that symmetry. But I feel like when you do collage, you have to have some essence or knowledge of design or color, fabric, or background and lighting. So it just comes naturally. But for me, it comes from like a design aspect.
And the same with me. I teach graphic design, so there is heavy architectural, sharp, blunt shapes. But the thing is, if you see my paintings, they're completely different. They look like completely different artists, and I think that that's what I enjoy. It allows me to deviate from one thing to the other. But when it comes to my collages, there is definitely a lot of design and architecture that comes into play.
Are these your photographs, or are these photographs that are from other artists or publications that I've seen in your work?
It's both. It's both.
Okay.
By all means, I've always been intellectually sympathetic to design. And more so, I'm just trying to tell a story. So the design aspect helps to kind of contextualize the story itself. So yeah, thank you.
Krista, why not design?
I'm an analog girl in a digital world. I think there is an element of design in my work, but what it is more, it's closer to design that you would find in like fashion magazines, advertising world, right? And I just don't know anything about Photoshop. I don't know anything about, design as an element of study. You know what I mean? It's just not. I'm just organic, just really like pulling from what's around me, and so it's just not. It's not something that's on my mind as a maker, But I do think that there is an element of design in my work which made it attractive at the very start of my career. It resembled things that people could easily attach their imaginations to, and the imagery was very familiar to people. So I think that it was that kind of spun me into where I am now, But design, I love design, first of all. It's something that I really do adore, but not for me to do it. I love watching other makers do it, you know what I mean? Yeah.
which was kind of going to get me into our next question. I know that everyone, of course, does collage, but what other mediums do you also do besides collage work? Let's start with Brody.
Besides collage work, I do actually paint mural walls, and I also I work in mixed media. But I guess to actually design digital collage was always. I feel like as an artist, you have to do what works for you and like stay in your own lane. And even when I was an undergrad, I felt like the graphic design portion of it, it stood out to me more. I'm always, like I said, scanning the room and looking at different shapes. I'm always looking to grab different pictures and different textures, and I've always done that. I'll be up late, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm just continuously grabbing images, and I don't know when I'm going to use them, but I'm just always grabbing stuff. So it makes it easier for me to, I guess, visualize what I'm going to do digitally. But yeah, painting, murals, and mixed media. But I'm known more for my digital collage than anything.
And you just finished a mural too, didn't you?
Yeah, I just finished a mural in Bethesda, Maryland. It's an organization called the Writing Center. So back to my original story where when I was younger, I struggled in reading. So right now my premise behind everything is to go out and talk to young boys and young girls and tell them the power of reading. Growing up in my community, dudes that I hung out with, they wasn't talking about their favorite authors, they wasn't talking about their favorite books at all. I was kind of like the oddball, weird kid, I'm gonna go home and read this book. So I want to push that, that made me like give a different perspective of like the world by reading all these different books and having all these different authors is like inspiration to me. So yeah, and the mural wall is actually telling the story of a young reader that turns into a writer. So it's a continuation of a young boy growing and flourishing through like this educational process.
So I got my start just drawing. I even had to change my Instagram handle. It was Kama Draws. But I since have not drawn anything. So I love drawing. Like I said, I'm working on my MFA in painting. Haven't painted. And I write as well. So those are kind of the creative things. In painting, I only used acrylics, so I don't paint in watercolor. I don't paint in oil. But I do use a lot of texture in my art. I use glass and resin. And with my collages, they're not digital at all, so they are really massive. I mean, from here it's just as small as a screen, but they're pretty massive. They're probably about 4 or 5 feet long. So I'm cutting papers, and I would say that I do dabble in photography as well. I think that they're natural sisters of each other.
I write, I make books. I sometimes play around with letterpress, sometimes mostly with other letterpress makers who are more, adept than me. I have a lot of images and ideas that are letterpress ideas, and they help me to execute them, right? I perform as well with musicians, a lot, particularly musicians here. Poetry, and then I sometimes sing. Not really a singer. I'm like, your voice sounds like you can sing. I'm like, I sing, but it's not always beautiful. Yeah, and I think that about covers it. I used to take I used to do a lot of photographs when I was younger. I was really, really obsessed with cameras, and I think that's how I landed here. Naturally, I totally appreciated what you said, about collage being photography adjacent. It is. It's like, it took me a long time to really recognize that, but that's what it is. It's essentially the manipulation of photographic images, and I've always been obsessed with photographic image. So yeah, I would say those are the main ones.
Yeah, I'm glad to know you're a spoken word artist. I cut my teeth as a spoken word artist.
Yay.
Yeah, so that's probably really my first love artistically, is spoken word. I still write a lot to this day, and I work with a lot of youth, teaching them alternative ways to express themselves with spoken word and with poetry versus using their hands or weapons or just kind of speaking out and being aggressive. They can channel that through creative writing. I'm also a curator, so I feel like collage and curation are adjacent to each other to a certain degree, because I'm typically working with artists who are totally disconnected from each other, but they create work that is based on a prospectus that I wrote that basically becomes a huge installation. Right now I'm working on an exhibition called The Next 100 Years, and it's 24 different artists, and all of the artists are depicting what the next 100 years will look like for melanated people. And again, some of the artists know each other, but they're from all different backgrounds, and I get to, almost like a collage piece, I get to assemble all of this work together to make a larger statement. Lastly, I'm doing a what's called a museum intervention. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Fred Wilson, but he essentially goes to different museums and recontextualizes their permanent collections. And so I actually have a show right now in North Dakota called Memories of Our Future, where I recontextualize their permanent collection. And it was really interesting because I did not go to school for curation whatsoever. I actually went to school for mass comm and worked in radio for a long time. But it's just interesting because now I get to actually, in this particular exhibition in North Dakota, I'm working with original pieces from Picasso, Andy Warhol, Faith Ringgold, just a who's who of different American artists. And I actually got a chance to make these pieces have conversations with each other. And again, I think that the curation component and the collage component are adjacent.
Yes.
For all of the panelists, how does spirituality inform your artistic practice?
Oof. How much time we have?
30 seconds. No.
Oh my God.
You want to start?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Again, philosophy is probably the driving force in my work. And philosophy, to me, kind of boils down to learning how to die, which is a whole different, bag. We can talk about that another time. But I'm a daily meditator. I always feel like I'm pulling work or pulling ideas from the ether, from the unseen world into this realm, and hopefully I'm a bridge for that, or a catalyst for that.
Yeah, I thank you for saying that, man. I agree. I definitely feel like most of my life has been operating as a channel, in some ways, as a vessel for whatever the ancestors want to share with me, In a more direct way, many of my works are embedded with metaphysical symbology, whether or not it's easily recognizable or not, And I'm frequently thinking about the work as some kind of extension of my spiritualities, my spiritual belief system, particularly as it pertains to like past, present, future, So I'm thinking a lot about what I like to call spirit world business, in the work. But yeah, it's present, it's in there. It's just not necessarily, I'm not heavy-handed about it, It's just kind of like gently embedded throughout the process. I'm thinking a lot about that. Black spirituality.
Yeah, so my pronouns are she and we. Because I call on we. I would say that, so my mom passed away 4 years ago, and it provided me a very intimate relationship with life. You know, my work is not about that relationship. However, I will say exactly what you said. Like there is this opportunity to provide answers to questions you didn't know you had, right? Like I don't go into my work with a goal or something that I want to portray, right? It's after I'm sitting there and then my work informs me, right? And it's like, wait a second, why are you using stairs in every single piece? Like, what is this passageway thing that's happening? You know, and those are still things that I'm trying to realize. Like, there's lots of windows, there's lots of stairs, there's lots of doors in every single piece that I have. And I feel like having that thing that happens, right? Death, we know is upon us, right? Like, you're expiring. We're all expiring.
Yeah, we don't get out of this alive. Nobody gets out of this alive. Sorry.
No, you know?
Yeah.
And so having that happen, I feel like it has made me a lot more empathic. A lot of the things that I do, or a lot of the things I say, I'm told happens right after it happens, right? And people are telling me that. So something I choose not to tap into right now. You know, like I don't want that for y'all. But I'm aware that it exists and it's happening like exponentially more often. So the spirit is definitely involved in my process. It's not as present in the work, but there are like my mom's in all my pieces. You know, in some way, there might be an I, you know, or my dad, but there are little nuances of my, you know, little Easter eggs for everybody. So it's like, if you know, you know. You know, if you don't know, then you're like, maybe I'm gonna look for it this time now that she said it, you know. So spirituality is very much present in my process, not necessarily, you know, as you know, bold in the work itself.
So I will say that spirituality like made me love myself. So I grew up in a very, very religious background. My birth mother, she's Jehovah's Witness, and my father's side of the family, they are Baptist, Christian. So, but like I said earlier, with me being a gay black man, I felt like that it just never ever really spoke to me. And when I started doing research on like religion and the definition coming from a Latin word to bind, I feel like that was binding me. It wasn't allowing me to express myself fully. So as Ren said, even with meditation, like I wake up every morning to that. I feel like aligning my chakras on a spiritual level has made me express myself way more. I look at everything as frequencies and vibration. Everybody in here has a frequency, everybody in here has a vibration. It's up for you to tune that to figure out who you are. I think it's Mark Twain who said the most important days of your life is the two most important days is the day you're born and the day you find out why you were born. And I feel like this is the reason why I was born. The way I'm able to reach people and connect with people that I would normally never connect with. That has, to me, that's everything, but you know, everything inclusive to like spirituality. I'm big on nature. I'm big on how when you look at the 4 major ingredients or the 4 major atoms that's inside of every person, you know, it's hydrogen, it's oxygen, it's carbon, like, and those are the 4 major active like ingredients that's in the universe. So we are all special because we are a part of the universe. The same things that found us is found out there in the world beyond us. I believe that we are spiritual beings living this human experience, and to activate that spirituality, like you really have to dive into like who you are, step outside of those social norms sometimes that they put on, and like I said, the religion background I came up with, so the spiritual side I feel like made me love myself. So I feel like that is portrayed in all of my work. And like Kmar said, sometimes when I sit down, I'm still amazed sometimes after the piece, after it's done. In some pieces, I'm not even gonna lie to you, I'll be in full blown tears after I'm actually finished, and depending on what it is and depending on what I guess I'm trying to convey in the piece. one of my pieces entitled Affordable Education, it actually talks about or highlights the anti-literacy laws from the 18 to 1600s, where like literally laws were written down on paper and signed by groups of people that didn't look anything like us, to say it's illegal for you to learn, it's illegal to you to read, it's illegal to you to grow. Every person I know that's an avid reader, they can always say how the power of words, even with spoken words, like the power of words, even that. There's another book called The Power of Water, and it talks about how words have so much power in them. It's a scientist, I think he's from Japan, and he did a project where he freezes water and he makes crystals. But he puts different words on different, I guess, different cylinders. Some might be ugly, the word might be scared or happy. And just those words alone will actually form a crystal in like what we would define as like a beautiful form or like an ugly form. So even speaking, I feel like that comes from a spiritual place. I feel like our ancestors are like behind us. We're literally standing on their shoulders. Our very DNA, like all these different organizations like AfricanAncestry.com that's able to connect our DNA in present day to the oldest village in Africa. Like that's, to me, that's spirituality. Like that is in our blood and it's being passed down. But when you can't activate that through your brain, which I feel like religion is to bind you, and once you do really unlock your brain, I'm a big believer in the third eye, your pineal gland, and so many things around us that makes us not unlock that, or even not know that exists, to not understand the spiritual power that we have in us. So I feel like that's my take on spirituality.
Thank you.
Could I ask a question about the technique, the actual technique of collage? I'm seeing in most of the examples that are presented that the image is a piece that has been taken, but it is kept whole. Like the leaf is the leaf, the crown is a crown, the hands in your piece, the wings and so forth. You have all the stairs and so forth. They're the pieces that you can actually see the thing. And I go back to Robert Bearden, where he was taking disparate pieces of paper and making you see those things. I am asking if anybody is aware of two collages that one came out of Chicago and others still here in Chicago. Paul Benjamin is in Atlanta now, and Arthur Wright is here in Chicago. They collage by taking paper and cutting it so it doesn't look like whatever the thing was that it's cut from. It can be colors, and they build up the image from these cut pieces. Paul did his in black and white, so he would take paper and then charcoal them, whatever, and create all kinds of shades of gray to black, and then cut them up, and then build up things that you saw in the collage. I'm kind of wondering that, is there a reason other than you, Krista, because I see yours is always more and more abstract. You're not putting the thing right there. But is there a reason why you're doing that? And are you familiar with these other techniques?
I'm not too familiar with the other two artists, but I want to look into them. But for me personally, like I said, my work is all digital. So for me, the collage aspect is bringing multiple things together that don't, necessarily connect to each other. Even if it's whole, if it's chains, if it's materials. But for me, it's kind of even when you look at some of my pieces, I feel like you still don't know how it was actually created. Most people, when they see my pieces as large, they think it's actually like acrylic, it's actually real paint. So I mean, for me, like that's just always has been my process to bring different things together. That's my level of collaging. But I know every artist has their own way of, I guess, like putting their positive energy or their creative out into the world. But yeah, that's just not mine. But there's no like comparisons for me as far as cutting it up. I think putting all these different pieces together and making one whole picture is making you see my story in that clear view. I hope that answers your question.
I have a follow-up. Go ahead.
I think for me, environment is just as important as subject is, especially in my work. I think because photography is so important to me, that the sculptural aspect of building isn't something that I lean into. I'm building, but it's more of a puzzle, more assemblage versus building outright. That takes a three-dimensional mind that I don't have. Like I am not, you know, I'm not three-dimensional. I can't sculpt, or I can do anything.
You just won't.
I choose
Right.
not
Right.
to do something I do not want to do.
Exactly.
And so I like that my images are very, very flat. I think that, you know, to speak on taking something and making it something it's not, I think that my work does that in an environmental space. Like it's like, wait a second, that doesn't naturally go into that, but for some reason I can still see the image in its entirety, right? It still looks like a whole, but then when you're actually into it, you're like, wait, this doesn't naturally go like this, right? And I would say that my work in the beginning did mirror some people. I think naturally, you know, there's this idea of imitation that's happening, right? And my whole goal was to get away from that, right? I was tired of it. So I even have like images where I do have Mick Thomas and Lorna Simpson like in the background, because it's like, oh, you say my work looks like theirs? Okay, they're going to be in my work. And so, you know, those Romare Bearden, especially with his environmental pieces, I would say that there is a very him, Mick Thomas, and even I would say with the photography, David Hockney. Those are artists that I use as guidance, but I'm very careful about imitation. So that's just something I guess I deviate away from a little bit.
Yeah, it's more like the inspiration that compliment.
Yeah.
But
I
it
think-
starts as copy.
Right.
And that kind of brings us to my next question too, because I think that, and I understand what you were saying, that just might just be his niche. That just might just be his way. And I think that every artist wants to be different. So what makes your collage different or more personal to you? What is a piece that you always bring, or what element that you think that you can give that's going to set your art different from someone else's?
For me, I feel like it's a lot of times people can't, well, they don't really understand if it's actually collage or if it's paint or if it's oil, if it's acrylic. That's usually like the main question I always get, because I have different textures that were like that would kind of like resemble like dried up paint, because I'm layering different like textures on top of different images. Also with my work all being like digital, and that's something that, you know, I feel like in the lines of when we first started with collage, it was looked at as like, okay, that's not really found out. Or like even with me applying for different exhibits or museums, and they're like, oh, what is your work? And like, it's digital. It's digital collage, and that's something I feel like I am like staying in my own lane and breaking into that. I mean, it's a learned skill underneath of fine arts, but it's something that was not always looked at, or still maybe not really looked at on the level of being a true fine artist. So I feel like that's what sets me apart differently than the traditional cutting of the paper and the gluing on, which the meaning of collage is, like glue and adhesive. So I think that's what sets my work apart.
I think with you, what drew me to your work was not only is it kind of puts me into like almost like a fashion mindset, but when I look at your work, I think of different textiles. I think of material, textiles, and prints, how you use them and how they work together. Like his pants there and his shirt, it all works together, and it almost like you can buy a material that way, or you can fashion a material and get that made, or even how the ground is. That textile is used a lot in China, well, in Britain for fine china, for plates. And those are the things that I think that kind of separate you also in your work.
Yeah, like Kemal said, I'm also a huge fan of photography. So I mean, the people that you actually see there are actual real models, and then everything else is me digitally drawing or placing together. So even like adding some of the different like textures where like so you don't really know, it's kind of a mix of everything. It's a mix of paint, it's a mix of photography, it's collage, it's drawing. So it's like this world of imagery just like pulled together from all these different like materials or textures, but it's still very much flat.
I think that the irregularity of my shapes is definitely something I'm not confined to a rectangle or square. I actually work from the inside out, so that's why it's kind of this idea that it could keep going, you know. I like to move in and out of space, kind of giving it a kinetic type of energy, like there's movement that's happening. And definitely just using the environment just as much as the subject, I think is something that is unique to the work.
And like on this one, it almost puts it in a like concave area. Like you, of course, you know that is a subway car, but it's curved, or it looks like from my side, it looks like it's curved. And I love the way that you cut, and there's always somebody crossing their legs. It seems like. What about you, Krista? What sets you aside?
I like when people say something that I don't know.
Oh, you notice that on that last one, 3 people had their legs crossed?
Right. Pointed at 3,
No,
like 2.
it is.
And then and there's someone crossing their legs and the other ones too.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't notice.
Those like crossed at the ankles, crossed
Yeah.
there.
Krista, what about you? What sets your collage work aside?
There's usually writing in my collages. There's usually some form of like writing that's happening inside of it. Handwriting, usually my own handwriting. You know, I feel like no 2 collages look alike to me. You know, it's like there's everybody's individual style is going to come through. Everybody's particular eye is going to come through too, right? I mean, I think that text is really important to me as a writer, so the writing shows up in the collages, right? But I also think the fact that I make handmade paper. I began to like as I was self-taught. So once I went to graduate school, I really went there to like learn some new tools. There's a very funny story that I will not tell that happened to me in my career where I was a very good teacher and I taught a student of mine how to mimic my style. And she's for me one of the biggest teachers of my life because she taught me that first of all that I could be mimicked. And then she encouraged me through that experience. She inspired me. She was a catalyst for me to push my ideas about what I thought collage did and how it functioned. So it forced me to go to graduate school so I could learn new tools. And because I was like, nobody will ever mimic me again. Ever. So it's handmade paper. Handmade paper and text are usually the things that I embed things inside of the paper. So it has like a kind of strange dimensionality, and I also tear away a lot from the wet process. So that's probably what sets me apart from other collage artists. But there are many collage artists, who make paper. You know what I mean? Like that's not unusual for a hand of paper.
And I like that too. I like art that I can touch and that has texture. Of course, one of my most favorite pieces of Kemal's is nothing but texture. It's glass and mirror. And it's a beautiful piece. But I'm one of those people, don't touch that, but you still want to touch it. It makes you want to touch it. So I like that about your work. Ren?
Yeah. Well, just to veggie back off of his question a while ago, I think you might just be seeing snapshots of probably all of our work up here. I'm sure if you did a deeper dive into our work, you'll see some of those more Bearden sort of elements in our work, at least I know in mine. But what I would say that separates my work is I'm actually I'm a gilder, so I do a lot of gilding in my work. That's sort of the thread through all of my work, even in my oil paintings. I used to buy cheap gold leaf from like Michael's or Hobby Lobby, and I would use that in my work. And I heard Chuck say foil earlier today, and I had to kind of have a little internal yeah. But I literally import precious metal from all over the world, from Japan. I use Chinese pewter. I'm using Italian 23 karat red gold, champagne gold. So the idea is that, going back to alchemy, I'm actually combining something that's essentially sort of not necessarily worthless, but inexpensive, like magazine clippings, but I'm also combining it with precious metal. And that juxtaposition, that contrast, I think is what makes my work a little different.
Yeah, I had a question. I mean, anybody can take it. But, I mean, trying to scale back a little bit, everybody here is a collagist in some form, some shape. But if we dial down and we talk about more like archiving and like organizing your works, how does everybody organize the stuff that they have to put into the collage? Because I know graphic might be digital, like you might have files in your computer. Or if you're at home, you may have like some kind of filing system. How does everybody archive their stuff?
My studio is a wreck. No, there's no rhyme nor reason to that. I do not, you know what I mean? I wish I had some kind of a structure to it sometimes. You know, I saw this beautiful, you could probably find it on YouTube, I'm sure, conversation with Wangechi Mutu. And,
I love her. That's my favorite artist.
yeah, she's brilliant. She's brilliant. But they were showing her studio, and she had like all of these plastic drawers filled with like eyes.
Yes.
Right? Like she had, everything was very like systematically, like if she needed an eye, she went to that particular, drawer. And I was just like, wow. Like I couldn't even imagine it for myself. You know what I mean? I was like, good luck, girl. It's a wreck. There's no rhyme or reason.
Organized to the T.
No, I mean.
Yeah. It's pretty incredible.
It's like once you start trying to clean stuff, it's lost forever.
Yep.
So it's like if I'm trying to find that one corner of a room, I'm never gonna find it again if I don't just leave it where I cut it, right? And then it's like I'm using the floor, I'm using the kitchen, I have 3 studios right now, and it's only because of opportunity, guys. I'm not paid for all that. And the home studio is one of them, school studio, and then I have a residency studio, and I need surface area because everything has to be laid out. I try to put things in bins, and like I said, once they're in a bin, I can't revisit it because my mind doesn't remember that I've stacked this away. So it's very, very hard to, I haven't figured it out yet. I haven't figured out how to organize myself.
Mine is like organized chaos, for real. And to be honest, I have thousands and thousands of files because I also take pictures and I'll upload them to my computer. At one point, my screen desk, it was just photos everywhere. You couldn't even see the background. I had to start creating photos and try to put certain images in certain ones, but that still doesn't work. Right. But I feel like I'm collecting so much. I feel like that's why it takes me so long to create when I sit down to create, because I'm literally going through hundreds and hundreds of pictures there. Like, okay, this will work, and then I'm picking that out, and I'm like, no, let me go back to the drawing board. So, but I do have a small workspace because I kind of start sketching and drawing out before I start designing, and that area in my apartment is trash. You got flowers everywhere, you got scissors here, you got some pieces of fabric cut, but like I said, it's organized chaos. Like Kim said, like I know exactly where something is when I come back in. You walk in my apartment, you're like, Okay, you're a little junkie, man. What's going on here? But I know exactly what it is, and if it's missing and it's moved, I already know what was moved from this file. I'm like, all right, I left it right here. So for me, that's just how my brain works. I feel like that my computer screen sometimes it mimics what my brain is going through while I'm creating, which is sometimes a bunch of chaos until I sit down and really focus.
By the way, I got one that came out fixed right
Yeah,
here.
I handed him something earlier and pulled out a scrap with it. And I'm like, I didn't even know this was here. Can't use it now.
Right. I gotta use iron.
Just, oh, my bad, go ahead. Oh, well, I was just gonna say everything they just said. And so, yeah, exactly, you guys' answers just mirrored exactly my internal process too.
Oh, there was one question right here.
Oh.
She was next. She was next.
Oh.
All right, so please bear with me as I work to form this question. And I think it's a challenging one for me, but I want to get it out there.
Mm-hmm.
So all of the work is amazing, it's beautiful, and I have so much respect for it. And what you're creating organically and infusing into the art, and also the fact that you're taking found items and images and creating something completely new. But one thing that does come up for me is rights around some of the images that you may find and collect and infuse into your work. How do you work around the legality of where the rights of the original art ends and yours begins?
I spend a lot of time thinking about that. And I actually started to deconstruct things even more out of fear of, lawsuit. But, the copyright laws are kind of loose when it comes to what we do. The idea is that if you take something out of its original context and you put it in a new context, then there's a lot of wiggle room in there, There's a lot of room in there, So it's not really like stealing directly from the original piece, right? If we were making, let's say I took an image from a magazine and then replicated the exact image of the magazine, then I'm working in some strange territory, right? I'm working in some dangerous territory. But the fact that we can take an image, remanipulate it into something else, it's not the same thing. So it's, you're not really in legal trouble.
It's not in its original form.
Exactly. You're not gonna be, sued. But it's a delicate space. It's definitely something to consider. But I think the work that all of the work that I'm seeing here with the artists who are here, there's no danger of that, because when you look at the image, you don't know where the original thing came from. There's no way you can figure that out.
That's my mama's wig.
Right. Exactly. I mean, it's like it's too deconstructed.
Right.
You know what I mean? So there's no concern. I mean, if you're going to replicate somebody's image, then you're going to be in trouble.
Right.
But these are images and ideas. These are works of art that are completely transforming whatever the original thing was, right? I mean, so I think that there's some room there. There's room.
I think you got one question. You still got your question?
Oh, no.
Okay.
I was just wondering, some of the photographs of actual people, are those photographs of actual people actual models? Or were they taken on the street, like I see all the children?
Yeah, so it's
and
both.
if so, did you get permission to use the images before using them in your art?
So that's the same thing that she was mentioning. I mean, so some of the photos are my students, some of my kids, my actual son's in one of those, and some of them skate the line of photography, archival, like documentation. So the one in the middle is like in a historical Fourth Ward Freedman town. So it's juxtaposing current day with past, which is okay within the lines, because that's another thing that I keep in mind, because I do use a lot of images. of people, so I do try to obscure them in a way that's different, change the context. And even more so, I have moved more so away in sourcing my own images. So even in that centerpiece, most of that, like the sky, the bricks, the buildings, like that's all stuff that I, took.
Yeah, for me, with my work being all digital, for me it's linking up with the actual models. They all are models, and purchasing like the model release forms. Small backstory: when I first started designing, I did a piece of Kamala Harris, and one of the photographers actually took the picture that I was using. I cut like half of her body off. I actually had to end up paying that photographer once my Instagram page started to go viral. So that was my first experience, and pretty much they were trying to make me pay more than I actually made off the actual image I designed. So that is like a sticky situation. That was like my,
It was a learning experience.
yeah, learning experience. Like, hell yeah, I'm like, I had to write the check. But yeah, so now moving forward after that, I started purchasing model release forms. So, but I'm moving into, like I said, taking my own photos. And I also have a close friend who's a photographer, and sometimes I'll go through his photos and I'll ask like, who is this model? And I have actual model release forms where I actually write up and get their signatures. And sometimes, like now, moving where I'm working with, if I am using your image, I will try to give you some type of proceeds. For me, that's paying the models to sit there, and it's actually working with my community. So that's what I started doing since the beginning of this year.
I do think too, like, I think there's something to, how can I say this? I mean, many, I think, collage artists, particularly black collage artists, are pulling from the archive. It's a way of, it's not, for me, it's a way of honoring. It's a way, you come through it with a way of honoring. When people pull an image that they're using in a collage, it's because they love that image. It's not because they want to replicate somebody's work. Do you know what I mean? It's because they genuinely have a deep love for that original source material. It's not typically out of malice, right? Even though, yes, there are issues around copyright and ownership, for sure. And people should be compensated without question for their work, right? But I do think that there needs to be a conversation that's about the deep love of the archive that black artists have, and how we use the black archive and black photographs to generate new worlds and new visions of what happened to us in the past and where we can be now. Do you know what I mean? So I do think that there's a tenderness and a care that goes into it, even though there is a kind of destruction of the original image, right? There is a care and there is a tenderness around it that I think should be discussed more.
That part.
Okay. And this may be sort of a trade secret, but the way I've been able to kind of get around that a lot of times is I'll do screenshots of video. So like if it's a movie or video or something like that, if I stop it at just the right time, then there's no actual archival image that somebody can reference to say, oh, this was my so-and-so, because it was actually a moving video that I stopped at a particular point, and then I got the image from there.
Okay, so to piggyback off that real quickly, so with technology moving forward, AI being in the presence, people can take images and upload them and have AI, depending on the prompt, have AI create a collage piece. Maybe have some of y'all artwork in there. If that is the case, how do you approach that, and what would you do as an artist?
I'm not going to do anything because I've got other things to worry about. You know what I mean? I don't, if somebody wants to do an AI Krista Franklin piece, I'm going to mostly probably giggle. You know what I mean? Like, if you're making money off of it, I'm going to be like, where's my cut? You know what I mean? Like, the machine didn't make that, I made it. You know what I mean? Like, but I just try not to get caught up in a lot of stuff like that because, again, I'm already in a cycle of, like, reproducing things, right? I'm in a cycle of collage. So if somebody uses one of my works to make a new collage, then I'm just like, well, that's the name of the game. That's how the game works. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
if the machine wants to make a Krista Franklin collage, that's great, because I've been doing machine, I come from people who were the machines of this country. Do you know what I'm saying? So if the machine wants to mimic the machine, then let's go. You know what I mean? That's my thought.
That would be my take too, because I mean, like, if you play the game, you gotta it's a part of the game. You know what I'm saying? So
you better,
And it's funny that you say that because actually this happened like probably 3 or 4 months ago. I got a random DM from a lady in Portugal, and she was like, "Hey, I finally found you. I bought your she's like, I bought one of your pillows with your artwork on." I was like, "I don't even sell pillows. Like, what are you talking about?" So I was like, what does it look like?" So she sent me a picture of it, and it was one of my images on a pillow. And I was like, "Well, where did you get this from?" And she was like, "Oh, I got it from a marketplace in Portugal." I was like, "Well, I haven't even been there. I'm glad my shit is there, but I haven't even been to Portugal yet." But even thinking about that, I mean, it's somebody's using my work, which they believe is beautiful, but also they want to make a profit off of it. But for me, like, I really can't do nothing but that. I'm not gonna hop on a plane and try to go to Portugal and find a person. So it's like, I feel like some of the greatest artists use, or some people might say they steal. Look at the rap game. They say some, present day rappers that stole some old day rappers like lyrics, or took a line and threw it into their work. So it's like that. It's got like that collage, taking something and putting it together. So like you said, once you play, once you in the game, like and I'm no different than anybody else or another famous artist who might have got their work stolen. So if somebody else got their stuff recopied or taken, somebody can take mine as well. But I feel like that makes me want to continue to create. It gives me like the inspiration, like, okay, somebody like my stuff enough to take it and then they want to make a profit off of it. And it's making me like say to myself, I can't never be stagnant. I have to continue to create, because everything that I created in the past is in my past now. And somebody might take that and use it, but I have to keep on becoming this visionary to continue to create and new images. Yeah.
I just got a couple more questions, and then we're going to open our Q&A. Now, one question is always, I ask this on every Art Smart. How do you price your work, and do you find it difficult to price it compared to what you would do for an original piece or for something that you might paint with acrylic or something, another medium?
Yeah, sure. And this kind of ties into his question about AI. So it's a little bit difficult, at least right now. I feel like I'm a little bit insulated from AI being able to copy my work because I'm actually using precious metal. But I have to think about how much money I'm actually putting in on the front end. And so if I have a large scale piece that is full of precious metal, I have to price accordingly. So scale and material is usually, in time, is usually what I factor in.
This is a very contentious subject for me. Yeah, I might not even really be able to answer that question because it's very complicated, But I do think that, to what Brent said, like, art is the only place where the person who's making the work is losing money before they even get started. You know what I mean? Like, we have already invested so much money into the things that we've made that when we do price it, usually we're underpricing. You know what I mean? And I know for a fact that in many cases my work is underpriced, and it's like that because I want my people to have my work, and so it's very complicated and it's very uncomfortable because when you price your work at particular price points that where it really should be, you're blocking out many people who love your work.
Right.
You know what I mean? So there's many things that I consider when I'm pricing my work, but mostly it has to do with, like you said, what I paid out on the front end to make it, the time that I took to make it, how long it took me, right? And what that piece means to me. There are sometimes pieces that I love so much that I will price it at a super high price point because I don't want anybody to have it. Until somebody shows up, and I'm just like, but at the same time, right? But at the same time, if you're gonna pay that price point, that's the price point that I feel comfortable about letting it go.
Right.
And typically, I'm really proud to say that a lot of my work is owned by my friends or by fellow writers, right? And so if I want to go and then visit my baby, I know where my baby is. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So this is, I think that this is every artist's issue. I mean, starting off and then even continuing. I think that I try to be as fair. Unlike Krista, I'm not married to my pieces. I use my children a lot as a muse. And sometimes people are like, you're okay with getting rid of that picture of your daughter? And I'm like, well, it's not my daughter. Like, she's just an avatar for what I'm representing. Like, I still own that process. That process is still mine. So whether the final result is in someone else's home, I still have that. Like, I still have that process. So me getting rid of that final result, I've gotten rid of a long time ago. So I'm not married to my work. But the problem is, it's not always the starting price. It's when do I increase? When and how much do I increase? And that has to happen.
It does.
It has to happen for the integrity of your collectors. It has to happen. So it's not even just for you. It's like these people are investing in you
on the front end.
On the front end. And they have to be able to have this asset as well. So for them, it has to happen. So it's not like you're like, oh, I'm a big shot now, you know. Now I'm charging 30,000 or 100,000 or however high you go, right? It's like it has to happen for the market, and so that's where my, I guess, struggle lies, is this when to increase and how much, because it's like, you know, everyone, some people are self-taught. I actually think we're all self-taught unless you have a mentor.
God taught.
Right? Like, you know, like none of us, you know, I don't go to Collage and be like, oh, let me go find, you know, like I'm teaching, you know, I'm working it out on my own. So me being in grad school is just giving me the opportunity to have studio space, right? I'm using it for what it is. And I say that to say degrees cost money.
They sure do. They sure do.
And
I
so
haven't
it's
paid mine off.
my philosophy is stay in school forever, so I don't ever have to pay it. So I'm just going to keep going back to school. But I say that to say that is something to consider as well in pricing. When you start getting accolades, right? When you start getting awards for your work and stuff, that stuff should be considered, right? And I would say to you, and he's actually helped me with this, being able to find different avenues for your people to collect your work
100%
can be helpful, like prints, like doing limited editions. So maybe you're not lowering your price for the value, but you're finding different ways for them to support you.
For it to be accessible.
Right? For them to access your work. And so that's also something to consider to, you know, kind of mitigate this moral resting struggle that happens with pricing.
I'm going to say yes to all three responses and piggyback off of it. It's actually the money you put in up front, the investment, but I'm glad that y'all using some of these keywords like investment, and like I always look at it as like building wealth for our community as well.
That's right.
And I feel like that comes part of like the art education, where it's actually an investment. You're investing in that person. You're investing in that person's creativity, their spiritual being, and what they want to put out into the world. And I feel like that key component is like always missed, where like even like increasing prices, that also brings wealth to people who look like you. I believe in different price points. I mean, you have some people that can afford a $10,000 piece. You got people that can afford a $100 piece, $500 piece. But also touching back on what Kmart said, is like you're not paying just for the piece. You're paying for that person's education. You're paying for that person's time. Krista, like, she's self-taught, so you're paying for all of the hours that she actually sat down and focused on this craft to, you know, perfect her own style and make her own style. So you're paying for everything. You're paying for the education. You're paying for that person. It's funny, I think I talked to Chuck about this when I first got here, and it's kind of been a conversation I think we've all been having since we got in town. I forgot the artist, but he talks about how he sat down and he drew a picture on a piece of on a napkin. And it took him like 10 or 15 minutes to do it. And he was like, all right, here, that's $20,000. And he was like, well, how can you charge that much? He was like, no, you're not paying for this piece of napkin. You're paying for all of the years that allowed me to now create this beautiful piece in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, and that takes time, that takes effort, that takes, you know, your commitment to your craft. So, and I feel like also with the accolades, I feel like I don't think there's another, I guess, a good time to raise your prices, and I feel like it depends on the person. And like you said, how much your connection to the piece, what it means to you. I feel like what it means to the community, but overall, and I told Chuck I was in Dallas for a show, Dallas, Texas, last week, and I was staying in Airbnb, and ironically going through the house, I mean, there's pictures of like white art all through the house. I mean, it's a white lady posing. At the end of the day, I was like, okay, it must be a white lady who lives here, and I want that same. I want that same representation. I feel like sometimes in like black homes, where you walk through this house and you see this representation of black art all through, you know, this home, and representing like well. So I think pricing goes to like what you believe about the piece, how much you put in, and also profit. This is, you know, for most artists, this is all we do to get like a paycheck for the most part. A lot of artists don't have that.
They are bills.
And you have other artists that might not be within our culture from our background where effortlessly they're putting a $20,000 ticket price on something they created, and like it's bought like this. I've been in multiple art fairs all through the country, and it's easy for them, like, don't even think about it. And sometimes it's not even an in-depth story or connection to their culture or people that look like them. It was more of like a hobby. And sometimes they just create a big work of art, and now they're like $20,000. And somebody's like, you know what, that big piece, it'll fit on my wall. But for artists like us who take that time and put that care and that love into each piece, I feel like it's also connected to our history, it's connected to our legacy, so that deserves, I feel like, a nice price tag. This book I was reading earlier, I think by Jay Shetty, he was talking about some of the most famous, I guess say, white artists. They were influenced by African artists, and then black Americans see this white people's artwork who's influenced by African, and then we try to create from that. So we're creating from our own space from people who look just like us. So that should have I guess, a decent price tag. It's a value behind it.
I want to have the confidence of a middle-aged white man.
Oh yeah.
In everything that I do.
Yeah. I feel you. Because a lot of times it's very mediocre, and they're like, you're going to pay this for it. And I'm like, okay, well, very good then.
Right.
And they're very confident about it. You know what I mean? Like, rather than having all of this angst around, right? This angst around the price
responsibility and like I said, the moral resting with it is tough. And then the thing is, too, you can't go backwards.
No. Once it's set at a certain price, you can't go back down.
Today's price
is not yet right. I really also just want to say really quickly too, just how much I appreciate you all talking about the investment piece too, because it's something that I always say to my loves who purchase my work. You know, first of all, I always say thank you, because, you know, nobody has to support my shit, so God bless. You know what I mean? But like, the other thing is that I hope that there is a day where you're trying to put your kid through school and you can sell this, you can flip this shit.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Flip it and put that baby through school. You know what I mean? Like, that to me would be the highest degree, right, of appreciation of my work, because then my work is leading to the next generation.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, I tell my friends that all the time, like, if things get too tough, man, flip this. You know what I mean? Flip it. Yeah.
Growing up, I was always taught that we should grow up looking at our images or images of ourselves on our walls, and that was very powerful to me growing up. What type of energy or power do you think that this new emergence of black art has done for our country or for the world?
I want to speak first on this.
Please do.
Because I have weird thoughts. You mentioned going to an Airbnb where there's like white artists, right?
It was stacked.
But I have been to, I won't say plenty, I've been to white homes where it was nothing but black art.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
this
Very
is, it's like, it's good for us that there's recognition, but it's like, is it for the wrong reasons? Are we borderline fetishizing, right? And so I'm sorry, I went to Peru this summer and I became super radical. It was just a lot of enlightenment, and I have just become in this space where it's just, what is happening, right? I'll even tell you another small story. When I first started grad school, so my last name is super ethnic, very African, right? My first and last name together, very, very ethnic. Can't pronounce it. If you just look at it, you'll try, you won't get it. And so I go by Kama Marie. So even the conditioning, right, the indoctrination of me dropping my last name so that people can understand or be able to be comfortable. I mean, we do it all the time. Like, someone will tell you their name, you're like, I'm just gonna call you Bill, right?
Right.
And so it's just this idea where my professor, right, my white professor, I was like, yeah, I think, should I use my last name? He's like, do it. And how he was so like excited about because African art is selling right now. So it's like this idea of, do I play the game and be okay?
Using it.
And I'm like, yeah, I am. I'm gonna be okay, because you know what? You didn't get one on me. If you're using me to be okay with saying, yeah, I support, okay, fine. Whether you're doing it for the right intentions, I'm like, you know what? It still means exposure and more eyes on our work. So I love that there is this exposure on our community. But I do think that there's a lot of just like smoke and mirrors with it. Which is why it's so important for it to be accessible to the youth and the education, and there be more writers about our work, so that the narrative continues, right? Because it dies with us, or it dies in the homes of the white people, because they have it. They have all of it. We've been to plenty homes. It's everywhere. Like, I'm saying, like, there's an artwork that says nigger on it. And I'm like,
Why did you want to own that?
It was a black artist, but it's like, why does this resonate with you? Like, I probably wouldn't even have bought that. Like, it's, like, what, how does it resonate, So it's just like, there is this importance that, yes, there's exposure on us, but the work's not done. Like, we have to keep infiltrating, and we have to keep talking about the work, and you have to keep sharing, and you have to keep, advocating. Sorry.
No, don't apologize. I don't have anything to say.
It was importante to me.
No, for me, to piggyback off what came out, I feel like every other ethnic group or race group, like, they intermingle with black people. We spend our money with them. They say that the black dollar stays in the black community for maybe like a day or two, where the white dollar stays in the white community for 2, 3, maybe 3, 4 months before it has to go out. So in return, like, compare, whereas you'll have different black consumers or customers that purchase black art, and I feel like that contributes to their generational wealth. Other races buying our art, that contributes to us. That gives us a level of monetary gain that we might not have had, and I feel like we actually deserve. Like, why should every other race or ethnic group in this country be able to profit off of everybody else, or profit off of us, and we can't profit off of nobody else, and set those prices that some, historically, like, white designers might create and have that big price tag on it. So for me, it also screams what Kim says, get lost. Whereas once it's inside some of these white homes, it's never really seen again, or it's maybe seen by some of their closest like white friends. So I feel like it's the exposure or across the board that I wish me and every artist of it actually gets.
All right. You think you got any questions in the audience?
I always answer.
With your question, just pretty much project your voice and let's have a conversation.
Okay. One of the first questions I had was about three-dimensional space that is being projected or presented versus a two-dimensional space. Is that your work? It's made out of flat pieces, but it creates three-dimensional space. That's intentional.
Yes.
Whereas, if I go back to Bearden again, he used paper and he tells a story, but it's really on just two dimensions.
Sure.
He doesn't, the things are not, he doesn't give you any clues that this thing is behind it.
Yeah.
Your eye makes that work.
Yes.
I think you have pieces that allude to the three dimensions.
Yeah, most people, like I said, most people when they see my work, they think it is. They don't think it's flat. They don't think it's 2D because of the texture, and it makes them want to walk up and actually touch it. But I feel like that was visually like appeasing for the eye. That's also something I can say that I feel like separates my work from other people. Where it looks like it's texture up there, it makes you wanna, it draws you into want to touch it, but it's still very much flat. So I guess you can say that the visual eye.
You did the same thing?
Yeah, I try to focus on creating depth in my pieces purposefully, intentionally, and that sometimes is easier said than done. I'll typically start with a ground of leaf, so that in and of itself is flat, you know, and so it's not, but if I do it the right way, I can build up. And I love what Kayma said about starting from the inside and going out. I feel like I start from way in the distance and then I work towards the viewer. And so that allows me kind of an opportunity to create depth in that way.
Krista?
I mean, I mimic many of what's already been said, you know, in terms of like thinking about composition, thinking about depth, working from the ground up. You know, I've always talked about that, working from the ground up, like creating an environment first, which then, you know, develops this atmosphere, you know, in the piece. And I also have been playing around a lot lately in the work with pop out, like thinking about like pop-up books when I was a kid, like how can I make something that's actually like popped out of the piece, you know? So I've been working with that too, like using cutting mechanisms, right, to create a sensation of depth to it, you know? Like there's an echo of something or something behind it. And I don't know, I kind of disagree with you, Patrick. I feel like Bearden's work does have a kind of depth to it in some of his pieces. You know, I do think that, you know, what you're saying about this like 2D thing that's happening in his work, but there are works of his that I've seen where I'm like, oh wow, you know, there's a lot of background that's happening and foreground that's happening, you know, which gives me the sensation of like atmosphere or depth in the piece. Yeah, but yeah, those are just some of the techniques. That one in particular is a piece that has pop outs in it.
Your stuff's actually very textured.
Yeah.
There's you use light. You know, like you use
shadow and light.
Sources of light and shadow because you have physical pieces that
on top. Yep, layered on in depth. Yep. Yep. Thank you.
I have a question. First of all, amazing work by all the artists. Absolutely amazing work. As an artist, if you're not commissioned to do a piece, how do you start? I mean, what are your thought processes about starting? You start with a blank slate, right? And what are your thought processes on creating a piece? And I have to assume everybody has a different perception or perspective on that, right? So I'm just kind of interested in hearing how you might start on creating just a piece just from a blank slate.
I guess that's all y'all trying to do like
Because let me say this, because from a perspective, from a photographer's perspective, you start with a vision on what you want to create, and then a lot of times you do. and then you start building on that. Then you input stuff in your painting or in your photograph, and you move stuff until you start to put things together. You can feel that you're starting to build on something. And so, but as a painter or as a graphic artist, how do you, when you start with a blank slate, how do we
start anything? My thing is just dive in there. Like the first gesture is you know, if you have a blank slate, the first gesture is whatever the first gesture is. That's the beginning of the piece, right? So it's like, if that's paint, you put a swash of paint down, you know, see where that's going to lead you next. You know, it's just really about making that first step, right? And then once you make that first step, then you can just build on it, you know? I think each piece is different for me. I embed a lot of writing in my work, so like sometimes the first step for my pieces is a line that I've actually written inside of on the paper, right? And usually it's something very nasty or mean, but you know, and then I end up painting over it or constructing something over top of it, right? So I think it depends, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure that the process is linear. Definitely different for painting versus collage for me. For collage, it's very like anxiety ridden, which is one of the reasons I pivoted into collage, because it slowed me down. With painting, I was very mechanical. Had a vision, painted it, right? Moved on, did it again. Just kept replicating that cycle. With collage, it didn't allow me to do that, right? It slowed me down a lot. And then now I'm working on several things. So now I have chunks. And then those chunks may end up becoming 2 or end up becoming 4 from 1. So I think that like I said, I might get inspired by a corner of a room, and then that corner of the room gets laid down, and then here's a puzzle, and I'm just like, ugh. And for me, tonal friction is a thing that I kind of depend on. I use a lot of black and white and these browns and these very moody things. So that thing kind of like dictates and governs where I go. Just the natural harmony of a composition will dictate it, and to kind of allude, you know, or go back to what we said before, that you're providing answers to questions you don't have beforehand. Well, for me, when I'm making my collages, I don't usually have, you know what, I'm going to talk about oppression. I'm going to cut out this brown, and I'm going to make it feel oppressed, you know? So I don't necessarily do that. But sometimes I do. Like, I'm like, you know, a lot of my more recent work is from old photographs from like my grandmother in Nigeria and my mom, you know, and me when I was younger. And so maybe the photograph is the first start, you know, and then that's me kind of building off of that. So it's always different for me.
For me, it starts with the photos, because that's always like the focal point in a lot of my art. And like I said, I'm up late sometimes just scouring through like hundreds and hundreds of photos until I find something that I feel like is going to stand out, that human expression, how they're actually standing, or the pose that human is in. Because I do a lot of reading, so a lot of times I try to find some visual way, or the way a person might be standing or posing, to actually express what I read or put it out there. For instance, well, not for this one, but Maverick, if you go over to Wade in the Water. So, for instance, this one. This is a part of the series I did, and it's actually telling the story of the Great Migration of African Americans leaving down south and going up to New York, or not New York, but up to North Period. But when I saw this piece of her standing there, I wanted to tell the story. Rarely do they tell the story of African Americans leaving down south and going up north from the female aspect. They always tell like, this man, he was on the run, and this man had to do this, he had to be strong, he had to get his family, but they really talk about the women who might have been pregnant during that time, who had to move through that, I guess that space of traveling, still caring, being a mother, being a wife, and I wanted to take the chains that we always, you know, see as symbolism, like these are the chains that oppress us, and I wanted to put that on her back. I wanted to not show her face. I wanted to not show the pain that she was potentially going through, living down south, going through, because I look at myself as like kind of like a storyteller. So I wanted to turn those chains to like protection for her back while she's on her journey. You don't really know what she went through. You don't know what she looks like. You don't know her facial expression. You just know that she's moving forward in life. So a lot of times when I present or design, I'm trying to tell a story from like that most like human aspect of that body, that form, putting that black body with the inside of that captured piece. For these smaller prints that I have these like the black frames, but most people saw my work on large pieces. I have these large, elaborate like frames. A lot of them are like gold a lot of times. I told Chuck, even in undergrad, when I had to go down to different museums and do write-ups on different pieces that I saw, I never really saw black bodies in these type of frames that were big and elaborate inside these galleries or these museums. So I always wanted to put us as a focal point in every piece. So every piece that I have starts with some human body and showing the form like human art, like we are art. And our skin tones go naturally with every color that we see in nature. So for me, it starts as a picture. And if that piece speaks to me, then I can relate that to something I read and tell a story. That's my focal point, and I build off of that.
And if you go back to that previous image, yeah, not that one, that one there. And so in this one, as you describe it, it doesn't matter what the person's face looks like.
No,
right?
Not to me.
That's not even an important part. Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah.
Well, in my case, I'm always working in series. So usually I'll let the series kind of dictate where I start. Like if I'm on the 5th version of this subject matter, I will just keep mining through the subject matter until I've exhausted it. I don't know if you can go, like that particular piece. It is talking about this idea of racial annihilation. And so I have a whole series of works that are about this idea of, obviously if a black man sleeps with a white woman, it'll typically create a brown baby. If a white man sleeps with a black woman, it creates a brown baby. Did I just say that? But you get my point. And so this idea that in the future, what these conservatives are so upset about and so afraid of is this idea of the browning of America. And so I will just exhaust that idea. And in this particular case, I have these black cops, which is what they're afraid of. Remember Dirty Harry with the long rifle. So like he'll shoot you with his black pistol, and we'll shoot them with ours. You know what I mean? So that the idea is, I just want to just constantly exhaust every angle of that subject matter until I run out, and then I can move on to the next thing.
I have a question for you, Rick.
Yeah.
How do you come up with the series though? Like, do you have like a running list, and then you just kind of revisit that list, or does it just kind of come to you and then? Because that is helpful. Like when you have a series or you have a deadline or something, it's easier to work. It's more depressing when you're just working to work and there's no reason why you're doing it. You're just doing it, and then you just have a stack of work.
Yeah.
And you just live with the work. And that's kind of just.
I know very well.
From personal experience.
I don't know, maybe. So yeah, I was just curious.
I think all artists go through that though, right?
All of the
time.
Right. I mean, you continually build up work, and some of it might not sell, some of it might, but you still stay in the moment of doing the work. You gotta keep doing that.
And just to answer your question, I'm always trying to, so the overarching theme, and I think this is important for artists of all genres, is to have something that is bigger than you, that you're working for, and that this message you're trying to get out. And so to me, that's inexhaustible. Like, so just the idea that this thing is happening, and artists are inherently, one of our true goals, I think, or one of the things that you always hear people say about your role as an artist, is you're supposed to document the times that you're in. And if you look at history books, I know a lot of you guys are avid readers. You know, you'll see old paintings, you'll see old pictures, and that's art. You know, that generation. So I feel like it's my responsibility to carry that on, but also with a lens to kind of expand the aperture to envision what the future will look like as well.
Definitely want to take time to thank these artists.
Yes.
They pretty much did. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we had Brody come from PG County, Maryland. We had Kmart come from Houston. We definitely have Kristen.
You had me coming from down the street.
Still in traffic.
Kind of straight.
She was in that traffic as well, but now, and that's that form of representation that is important. And we also have Ren come from Atlanta. And so we definitely are happy that we had just a nice group of artists here to pretty much share their experience. So please follow these artists. Please basically take a look at their large amount of work, because they are definitely good artists, as you saw me going through the slides here, but that doesn't speak to it. They told you they do other forms of art as well. So let's follow them, continue to support them. Buy what you like is pretty much Diaspora Rhythm's slogan. Diaspora Rhythms, feel free to go to our website to basically continue to support us, provide us with donations. We are a 501c3 organization. So if you don't understand 501c3, those donations are pretty much can be used as a tax write-off. But understand that we're pretty much in the community trying to continue to push the message of art. Definitely want to thank our host Chuck. He did a great job with those questions. Tony, our videographer, we definitely appreciate you as well. As you all got something out of this, you all know that others need to hear this, so we had to document. And once again, I want to pretty much thank the founders of Diaspora Rhythms and the executive director for basically bringing us together to celebrate the 20th anniversary and carrying the legacy of the organization on. So definitely, truly appreciate you. And for that, I want to say, once again, follow the artists. And thank you for coming out.